Being nice feels like the right thing to do. You stay patient, you explain yourself clearly, you give them the benefit of the doubt again and again. You believe that if you stay calm, understanding, and kind enough, eventually they'll see it. Eventually they'll soften. Eventually they'll change. But here's the hard truth. Being nice doesn't change a narcissist. It reinforces them. A narcissist doesn't interpret kindness the way a healthy person does. They don't see it as goodwill or cooperation. They see it as access to your time, your energy, their emotional reactions. When you stay nice while they cross lines, you teach them that there are no real consequences, only endless chances. They are not confused by your boundaries. They are testing whether you will enforce them. What actually changes the dynamic isn't more empathy, more explaining, or more patience. It's consistency without emotion. It's calm, predictable self-respect. It's doing the same thing every time a line is crossed without anger, without justification, without debate. Narcissists thrive on reactions. Defensiveness feeds them. Anger energizes them. Even over-explaining gives them leverage. When you argue, you're still engaged on their terms. When you plead, you're still proving they have power. But when you respond calmly and follow through every single time, something shifts. You stop reacting. You stop chasing understanding. You stop hoping they'll change if you say it the right way. Instead, you change what you tolerate. You change what you participate in. You change how available you are to disrespect. And here's what's important. This isn't about punishing them. It's about protecting yourself. You don't need to convince a narcissist to respect you. Respect isn't negotiated. It's observed. They notice patterns, not speeches. They learn from outcomes, not emotions. When access to you becomes conditional on respectful behavior, the dynamic either improves or they lose interest. Both outcomes are a win. Being calm doesn't mean being weak. Being detached doesn't mean being cold. It means you're no longer handing your nervous system over to someone who refuses to handle theirs. You don't announce your boundaries. You live them. You don't threaten consequences. You apply them. You don't explain your worth. You demonstrate it. Being kind without boundaries teaches a narcissist what they can get away with. At first, it feels like generosity. You tell yourself you're choosing peace, maturity, and emotional intelligence. You give them extra chances. You overlook the disrespect. You soften your reactions because you don't want conflict. But over time, something subtle happens. Your kindness stops being seen as kindness and starts being treated as permission. A narcissist doesn't learn from intention, they learn from outcome. When they interrupt you and nothing happens, they learn interruption is allowed. When they dismiss your feelings and you still show up the same way, they learn your emotions don't carry weight. When they cross a line and you explain instead of enforce, they learn that rules are flexible as long as they're dealing with you. Boundaries are not about control, they are about clarity. Without them, your kindness becomes confusing, even exploitable. A narcissist is constantly scanning for where resistance ends and compliance begins. Each time you remain kind while ignoring your own limits, you quietly redraw the line in their favor. Not because they misunderstood you, but because you taught them through repetition. What behavior costs them? Nothing. This doesn't mean kindness is a flaw. It means kindness without structure becomes unsafe. Imagine leaving your front door unlocked in the name of trust. You wouldn't call that love. You'd call it risk. In the same way, emotional openness without boundaries invites intrusion, and narcissists don't hesitate to walk through doors left open. What's dangerous is that the longer this pattern continues, the harder it becomes to recognize yourself. You start doubting your reactions. You wonder if you're too sensitive, too demanding, too much. But the truth is simpler. You were consistent in giving, and they were consistent in taking. The shift happens when kindness is paired with consequence, when warmth has limits, when access to you requires respect. Boundaries don't require anger or punishment, only follow through, a calm no, a quiet withdrawal, a consistent response that doesn't change based on their mood or manipulation. When you stop rewarding disrespect with continued access, the lesson becomes clear. Either the behavior adjusts or the distance increases. And in both cases, you win, not because they finally changed, but because you did. You chose self-respect over self-abandonment. You chose clarity over confusion. And that choice becomes the ending point of exploitation and the beginning of peace. You cannot heal someone who benefits from staying the same. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, especially if you are empathetic, self-aware, and willing to do the work on yourself. You see potential where others see patterns. You believe that love, patience, and understanding can reach anyone. But healing requires willingness, and someone who gains power, comfort, or control from their behavior has no incentive to change it. A person who benefits from staying the same is not stuck, they are settled. Their behavior works for them, it protects their ego, maintains their image, and secures their advantages. When you try to heal them, you are asking them to give up something they rely on. You are asking them to face discomfort, accountability, and vulnerability. Things they actively avoid because avoidance keeps them in control. This is why your efforts feel invisible. Your compassion is not met with reflection. Your boundaries are met with resistance. Your pain is met with dismissal or deflection. Not because you are unclear, but because acknowledging your reality would threaten the system that benefits them. Healing would require them to admit fault, share power, and tolerate shame. Staying the same costs them nothing. What's even more dangerous is how easily this dynamic pulls you into responsibility that was never yours. You start monitoring their moods. You adjust your tone. You filter your truth. You work harder to keep the peace, believing that if you can just explain it better or love them more consistently, something will shift. But healing cannot be outsourced. Growth cannot be forced. Awareness cannot be implanted. The more you try to save someone who benefits from their dysfunction, the more you abandon yourself. Your energy goes into managing their behavior instead of honoring your own needs. And slowly you confuse endurance with loyalty and suffering with love. The turning point comes when you realize healing is not about fixing others. It's about choosing environments that don't require you to be broken to survive. You don't need to convince someone to value you. You don't need to sacrifice yourself to prove your worth. You are allowed to step back from dynamics that reward harm and call it self-respect. Some people don't change because they can't. Others don't change because they don't have to. When someone benefits from staying the same, The most powerful healing choice you can make is to stop participating in the system that rewards them. Walk away from the role of healer. Choose clarity over hope. And let your peace be the proof that not everything is meant to be saved, especially at the cost of yourself. Consistency changes dynamics more than confrontation ever will. Confrontation feels powerful in the moment. You finally say everything you've been holding in. You raise your voice, list the facts, explain how they hurt you, and demand change. It feels like progress because it releases pressure. But confrontation, especially with emotionally manipulative or narcissistic people, often becomes noise instead of transformation. That's because confrontation relies on the other person's willingness to reflect. It assumes logic will land, empathy will activate, and accountability will follow. But when someone benefits from misunderstanding you, confrontation gives them exactly what they want: emotion, engagement, and something to argue against. They don't hear the message, they study your reaction. And once the emotion passes, the behavior returns. Consistency works differently. It doesn't argue, it demonstrates. When you respond the same way every time a boundary is crossed, calmly, briefly, and without emotional charge, you remove confusion. You stop sending mixed signals. You stop negotiating the rules of engagement. Consistency teaches people what to expect from you, and that predictability reshapes behavior far more effectively than passionate speeches ever could. Think about it. A raised voice may shock someone once, but a repeated consequence teaches them permanently. When you leave the conversation every time disrespect shows up, when you disengage every time the tone turns manipulative, when you stop explaining yourself